In this episode, I sit down with Ryan Goddard, COO at SD Builders, to talk about how he's helped scale one of New York's leading affordable housing contractors while keeping projects on time and teams aligned. We talk about building systems from the inside, hiring the intention, and why the right culture can take a construction business further than any spreadsheet. Let's get into it. Ryan, thanks very much for joining us on the CPC. Really appreciate you having you on.
Yeah, glad to be on. Thanks for the invite, Jamie.
Perfect. Well, look, for us, it's all about kind of understanding your story, really. So we'll just jump straight into finding out a little bit more about your background. So, look, I mean, you've got obviously an impressive foundation with dual degrees of, I think, across the mechanical engineering and construction management, right? What kind of first brought you into the world of construction? Was it something from an early age or passion?
No, it was like you said, I went to university at Loughborough, did like mechanical engineering. My initial intention was to try and get into Formula One, and that obviously didn't happen. But I got the opportunity after graduating to come over to the US and coaching football or soccer, and was coaching 8-year-olds, getting paid way more than someone coaching 8-year-olds would get paid, and did that for a while. And one of the benefits of that was actually ended up meeting my now wife. So we got married. I moved over, and once I got my kind of work visa and whatnot, my wife's family were in construction, so I was doing some work with them, and got introduced to a GC and just started at the bottom. So started as a plan clerk, quickly got to APM, then assistant super, then PM, then senior PM, and at some point I was working for a GC that had slowed down quite significantly, and I was kind of exploring the market, but also I'd set up my own consultancy firm. Okay. And the firm started to take off, where I had one of those firms where, someone would ask you, could you do this? And you would just say yes, and it was, so I was doing like a real hybrid of like estimating services, some project management services, owner's rep work, and consultancy. And then one of my clients is now my employer, and they were going through a little hard time with their construction company. So they're a successful developer, been around for 13, 14 years. Had set up a construction company about 10 years ago, and it was struggling. Like a lot of the developers that get into construction, the initial couple of projects do struggle because it's always seen as easier than it actually is, and
baptism of fire, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just a lot more moving parts that weren't accounted for, and so they asked me to come in and say, like, look, what can you come in and look at the construction company and see what's wrong with it. So I did that, and then they said, okay, can you tell us how to do it right? So I did that. And they're like, can you write a business plan? So I did that, and I remember getting to the end of the assignment, which was about 6 months, and I said to my wife, there's one or two things going to happen here. Either they're just going to say, thanks for your time, or they're going to say, do you want to run the business? And I sat in the meeting, and the partner had most of the stuff that I'd sent to him, like all the documents and whatnot, printed out. And he, in more words than this, said, do you want to put your money where your mouth is and, kind of run our company? So we went through a bit of a protracted negotiation and, agreed that I'd come on board. And that was, 6.5 years ago. And we took them from a small GC that was struggling to, last year we were the largest builder of homeless shelters. We're fully bonded by Berkshire Hathaway. We have a SDI program, which basically allows us to qualify for a ton of other projects through Lloyd's of London. We are, leaders within our space, and very much in every sense of the word, leaders in our space. And we're profitable, and we do the right thing, and we try and keep good employee retention. So it's a big focus of that was make sure we have the right people doing the right jobs and then the right processes to assist them doing what they do.
That's amazing. In 6.5 years that you've managed to take a business that's struggling to the one that seems like it's thriving, and it's obviously got a bit of a purpose and a passion as well behind what you guys are doing. It's certainly what it sounds like. That's very impressive. I mean, you guys obviously do projects across the board. You know, obviously theatres, retail, but I take it you get a lot of the housing projects. You guys tend to kind of get focused in.
Yeah, our bread and butter is housing, right? So it's and that runs the gamut. So like we'll do market rate rentals, we will do affordable housing, and we'll do homeless shelters. We also do a little bit of medical office. So we're just getting into the medical office space, but that's been really how we've done. And then some like auxiliary projects, like you say, we've done a little bit of retail, a little bit of other stuff, but really not too much. It's mostly housing is where we like to be.
And obviously, as a developer as well, what we tend to see the developers that have got the construction arm, they've got the financing, they kind of manage the whole kind of supply chain all the way through to even being landlords. Is that something that you guys manage, or are you very much the builder and then sell the properties off, or do you get involved in that aspect of actually running the developments?
So the development company that's like, I guess like our parent company, if you will, they do that company does all that. What we did in actually one of the very first decisions that was made when I came on board was there was role ambiguity. So you know, being a business owner, that if confused prospects never buy, confused salespeople never sell. And like for us, it was like, okay, confused project managers just can't build, right? So they didn't know their role of like if they were owner's side or GC side, and so there was that ambiguity of like I'll give you an example. There's $3 million of change orders that were never submitted. So that's a ton of revenue that just was never even requested. Never mind like not paid, it was just never requested. So the first thing we did is we were like, no, we are going to run this as a separate standalone general contractor, and we are going to try and be the best general contractor that we can be. And by doing that, we will add significantly more value to our parent company, because we'll be a better GC and be able to advise and opine on things more constructively. And separately, we'll add real value to the business, because at some point, which we started doing about 18 months ago, we'll be able to spread our wings and go out to the market and say, and pursue third-party work.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, super busy. I mean, one thing I was going to say is that you 2019, was it? I think you stepped into that role. Did you come in straight as the COO? Obviously, I take it you obviously rolled straight into that role. So how's that role evolved from when you first stepped in to where you are now, given the scale of obviously the business where it was to where you are now?
So, initially it was very much like triage. It was, you're kind of trying to, okay, what's going on with these individual projects? So essentially, I came in with get an understanding of what the true issues are. And I'd done the consultancy, but there's certain things that people don't tell you when you're a consultant, that once you get in, that now you're rudely awakened to that. So one of those things was the change order issue. So so how do we deal with this, right? So the first thing we did is we identified the issues. Then we immediately plugged where the leaks were. So we looked at like immediately plugged all those issues, like, okay, let's get these change orders processed into the owners of the building, and then let them decide if they're going to pay or not. If they don't, they don't. If they do, they do. And so that was the first step. The third step was, okay, do we have the right people? And so we said, okay, these 15 or 10 people, I forget how many it was, are the right people. We think these people are the right people. These 5 or 6, they're not going to work out. So we went for a period of bringing in new people and letting the people that were just not going to work out for us for a number of reasons go. And that, we did that relatively quickly. And after we had the right people, then we started looking at how we do things. So it was like, okay, this is everything that we've done so far. This is how we do, whether it's submittals, RFIs, change orders, contracts, whatever. This is how we do. This is how we've done it. Has it worked? If it hasn't worked, then okay, how can we do it better, and what's the best way to do it? And so, we looked at that. One of the things that was kind of easy was there was no technology usage. So we essentially had a blank slate. So we searched the market for initially some project management software. We looked at Procore, Autodesk, Red Team, and a ton of others. We ended up going with Autodesk for just a number of reasons. They made sense for our business, but that was kind of our process of kind of getting that ship steady. And then since then, so that was like year one. So year one, we got those projects stabled, and then we started 2 more projects. Like, okay, how the 2 projects at the end of year one, and when I say year one, I mean my year one. I don't mean year one of the business. Okay, how can we set these 2 projects up to be successful? So I'm like probably way more involved as like almost like a senior PM, like just in the details, in the weeds of those projects. But over time, actually, let me just go back. So then year one happens, and then immediately on my 1-year anniversary, COVID happens.
Yeah.
So then it's like, so we've got all our systems, and we are actually now moving in the right direction. And then it's just like, then you're firefighting. So we were immediately like trying to like lobby to keep our work going. So we were fortunate that a lot of our work fell under the remit of essential, whether it being affordable or support homeless shelters or supportive housing. So we were able to keep a lot of that going, which was great for the success and the longevity of the business, just because it kept revenue in like a tough time. After we kind of landed the plane from COVID, we just kept upgrading the staff. So now we have like a really good like level of like project managers, senior project managers, and supers. That my role with them now is more like mentorship, guidance, strategic initiatives, like how are we going to pursue, which projects are we going to pursue, how are we going to direct, where we're going to like go, and then like client facing, plus a ton of political stuff. Like construction, particularly what we do, is very much like, it's government work. So if you don't know the people in the agencies, you don't know the electives, you don't know like whether it's your council member or your state assembly member, and to some extent sometimes you're member of Congress, but it's less of that. It's more like on the state and local level. If you don't know them and you can't pick up the phone and like say, okay, this law is interfering with our work, we need to figure a way to back that down. So that side of the business has become more and more. So I was like probably more in a senior project manager role, and over time have kind of like, even though titles say the same, has like progressed to like very much more strategic, big picture. But you can only do that, as you probably know yourself, once you have like really good lieutenants that can like lead projects, and you're not going to be worried about someone just not working, or someone just completely messing something up.
I think that's probably one of the most difficult parts of building a business. I think certainly when you've gone in, and it's not necessarily a startup, but it's almost like a restart up, right? And you've come in at that level where you've got that experience to be on the projects, or you're certainly building the foundations on the projects. And obviously as you scale it up, you then go into more of a senior strategic position, kind of rather than being a coalface, you're then making the strategic direction of the business. How are you going to go about kind of finding those particular people? Because look, obviously I run a recruitment business across the UK and the US, and it's highly competitive, really highly competitive. I don't think I've ever seen the US market so competitive for people, right? Mm-hmm. How do you kind of go about finding your people and ensuring that you get the right kind of caliber of individuals for your business?
It's tough, right? It's tough. You go through a ton of candidates to find the right person. Lola, we'd say like you got to slay a lot of dragons to find the princess, right? That's kind of what it is. But what we've done is, so we with the way that we approach anything, whether that's hiring or like project management or accounting, is control what we can control, right? So it's like, so what can we control? Well, we can control how we look at resumes. We can control which recruiters we work with. We can control how many people we want to interview. Sometimes, people don't show up. We can control our interview process. So we've really looked at our interview process and made that as rigorous as possible to make sure that we're weeding out people that just aren't going to be good fits. And, this is not, not a good fit for a number of reasons. So what we do with that, we have a minimum of a 3-stage interview, depending on role, but like it's typically a 3-stage. There's a phone interview with peers. So like, if you're going to be an accountant, you're interviewing with other accountants and they're like kind of feeling you out, asking you some technical questions, making sure that, they
You can actually do the job.
then if they recommend they put you forward, then once they put you forward, then there's and the order sometimes changes, but there'll be, let's say it's a project manager. Well, our project manager and our site supers work from the sites. So we'll have them go to the site, meet with the site team, we'll meet with a site team, and they're going to kind of really drill into like, okay, this is how we do stuff. This is how we do this. This is the makeup of our business. This is what we do. Tell us about your experience, blah, blah, blah. And then they're going to say like, okay, this person could be a good fit, or no, this person is, there's no way they're going to make it here, and so that's a good screen. And then the final stage, we have a 3-part stage on the final stage. So the first 2 parts are a bit of gamification. So we have some of that is, kind of putting people in unusual situations. I'm not trying to reveal too many of our secrets. Well, we've gamified the interview process on the final stage. So like it's real dig into like technical knowledge, like, and a real dig into kind of like, thought process. And then it's an interview with me, and my interview is very much scenario based. So it's scenario based to pick up, are you a good fit for our culture? So I'm assuming, I'm leaning on my guys that have previously interviewed to say like, okay, you're technically sound. Now there's still going to be some technical questions in there just for a gut check, because people can fake it. But like my interview is, are you a good fit culturally? That's really what I'm trying to find out. Our culture is like, we look for people that are proactive, hands-on, are striving for excellence, are like eruditious, so people that like want to like educate themselves, and generally like focus on just constant never-ending improvement. That's what we look for. That's not typical in your construction industry. Like, a lot of the time people go, I need a DOB super, you're going to place a DOB super. I don't care for that. Yes, like, okay, we want a DOB super, but it's got to be the right fit. I want this project built, I want it built fast. So, and then, so that's the positive side, bringing in, that's how we bring in people. Negative side is if you don't work out, if you don't work out, we let you go pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a smart way to kind of manage it. That hopefully the process from a recruiter's perspective, that process is relatively quick from first to third interview, because naturally the market's really, really competitive. So hopefully that is the case. But I think you are right. I think the role of leadership when you get to that stage is ultimately about you making sure that person's a fit for the business. Rightfully, the whole point of them meeting with their peers or somebody who would specifically directly manage that person is to understand whether their competencies are sound. But I think that sometimes it's kind of too formal a process all the way through. And I think at the end of the day, the leadership should really understand, can this person work within our business? Because not necessarily square pegs, round holes, but there's no such thing as a perfect fit on paper, right? It's about understanding, yes, they may be a little bit short on the competency. Maybe they've got some really good skills that you like, but if they're a solid person and you think to yourself, you fit culturally here, you can teach them those things. And I'm not saying that, you kind of forego certain things within your process, but I think that makes sense because, as you rightfully said, some businesses do not operate that way within their recruitment process. And it's a bugbear of ours, to be fair, as recruiters, because it's something we see that absolutely slows it down, and it can be quite detrimental to businesses, attracting the right sort of talent. It seems like you've got like quite a system orientated and system driven kind of mindset, really. Do you find that kind of works very well within the business from when you kind of started all the way through, setting up those processes and those and kind of building out those systems? Have they really supported the growth?
Yeah, I think so. It's like we try to look. It's construction's like one step removed from manufacturing, right? You're not building the same thing over and over again, but we're building similar buildings, particularly when it's affordable housing, over and over again. And so every step should be, we look at it and say, okay, is this the optimal way to do it? And sometimes we don't do the optimal way, but we're deliberate about not doing the optimal way. We're like, okay, we're not going to do that way because of XYZ reason, right? But it's like we're deliberate on that. So, but I think you have to be, because there's so much risk in construction. There's the risk around, just safety in general, right? It's a dangerous trade. It's not like running a recruitment company where the worst that can happen is someone spills a coffee on the lap. Like it's like, people could seriously get hurt in construction, and they do. People do get hurt. So you got to have a very strict safety program,
Yeah.
and then it goes from there. Like if you have a strict safety program, you have to have a strict QA/QC program to make sure you're installing the correct way. To get a correct QA/QC program, well, now you need to think about how you're going to build stuff. So now you need a comprehensive pre-con and pre-development program. So that makes sense. So if you're going to have a comprehensive pre-development program, you need a comprehensive estimating program, and a comprehensive risk management process. So that makes sure that your insurance and you make sure the right subs are coming on the site, and that those subs are qualified and financially viable. And then on the back end, you're making sure that you're paying people, you're getting paid, and you're paying people the right amount, and they're waiving their rights to lien you, which is, a nuance of US law that you don't deal with in the UK, but and that they're paying their people, right? Which is again, that's a New York State, and some other states have laws where, the GC is responsible for making sure that their subs are paying their people correctly. So it's you have to be, because there's so many things that can trip you up that, if you're not, and the contractors that we've worked with, and that have, I think any of us have worked for, that aren't like that, they always end up into stuff that is knowable, but it just hits them by a surprise. And it's it's always a fire drill. And we're trying to minimize the fire drills to deal with, when there is an actual issue, to make sure that we have the capacity to resolve the actual issue.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, look, one of the projects that you guys have done, I think that was quite a large project, but was one that stands out. You obviously, I think you took the JFK Hilton, didn't you, and converted that into affordable housing.
Yeah.
It was kind of a landmark project. It was quite large. Was it 320? Was it something like 320?
Yeah,
units?
roughly. I think it was we took 320 hotel units and converted it into 315 housing units.
Jesus. So what was the biggest challenges that you found on that? Obviously being a large scale project, and obviously converting an already kind of standing building. What was the biggest challenges that you had on that, and transferring it from a hotel into affordable housing? And what are you kind of most proud of in that process?
So there was a mechanical system that the engineer thought that we could save. Once we started demoing and really seeing what the guts of the building were like, there was zero chance that was a viable system. So we replaced all the mechanicals, essentially upgraded the entire electric. We had to expand the electrical room because, you in an apartment, you have, ovens and
all the elements,
microwaves, which you don't have in a hotel, right? So you're increasing the electrical capacity. We added new AC, we added new plumbing systems. We completely, converted the entire, it was a complete gut reno when we converted it. And then that was built. We essentially built on a lot that was somewhat landlocked, if you will, from the road, because the initial parcel of the hotel was owned by someone that wanted to retain most of the parking lot to build 3 more hotels. So we had a sliver of a driveway into the hotel to build. So it was logistically tough because they were building 3 buildings around us at the same time. At the same time we were doing this. So, but that was a tremendously successful project for us. We, the guys on that project smashed it out of the park. We had 21 months scheduled. They completed it in a little over 12 months.
Oh, wow.
We have a fully, inside, tropical garden area that they built. We have, the apartments are starting to, be leased up, and it just looks beautiful. Like a gym, new amenities. It was a really successful project there.
That's great. I was going to say, obviously having kind of done that and successfully, I was going to say that next, as one of my next questions is that a track that you've started to see yourself kind of going down and unfolding now that you've done that tricky project once? You know, like you say before, you know, doing housing, it's not the exact same project every time, but the structures and problems, etc., should theoretically be roughly the same. So is that something that you guys are seeing that you'll be able to do going forward?
Yeah, we have a we in Manhattan, so it's going to have even more notoriety around it once it's complete. So,
And a few more logistical problems.
yeah, yeah.
I was going to say, doing it in Manhattan, anything Manhattan seems to be so difficult given the traffic and everything else that runs through it. It's a pain in the ass. What? Obviously, look, being a recruiter, right, I always think to myself that from our perspective, what's the biggest challenges that you face to kind of when you're trying to grow the business? What's the biggest recruitment challenge that you found specifically on complex projects? If you need specific skill sets, what's some of the large scale issues that you face?
So I don't. Well, on complex projects, one of the challenges, and this is actually the challenge for not just on project specific stuff, is finding senior people that are actually competent. There's a lot of people out there that have great resumes, have worked for great companies, have spent 30 years at XYZ companies, got all this experience, but you can't give them a set of drawings and say, build this, because they've always worked within great teams. So there's always been like, you know, 2 or 3 people that are actually excellent, that are still at those companies. And so it's really sifting through like for like senior people. We find it very, very difficult to find senior people that can come in, fit into our culture and actually get shit done.
Yeah. I was going to say that the struggle that I always tend to see from that perspective is like you say, you might have somebody who fits the role in terms of their experience in, let's say, if you're looking for a senior PM, they might have done it for, you know, one of the kind of tier ones or what have you, or, you know, large scale GCs. But when you bring them into your business structure and your expectation of what you're expecting those senior PMs to actually deliver, I always find that the larger the business, the less they have to do, because they've got, like you say, large teams around them. So, you know, that's always the complex issue of kind of fitting those people into it. So do you find then that there's a, you know, without obviously saying names specifically who you can't hunt from, but is there a specific set of businesses that you find that those particular people fit very well within your business?
No, I think it's tough. Sometimes you find like, you know, diamonds in the rough where, you know, they've worked for companies that we wouldn't like. There's companies that we can think of that we try not to hire from because there's just so many poorly trained, you know, they're just not a great company. So we're just not like, you know, they but we've also hired like, you know, a couple of guys that have been good from those companies, you know, like it's more just like us on our, in our recruitment process, really digging into like, you know, the interview process, really scratching below the surface of like, okay, what did you actually do on a day today? What were you actually doing? Like, tell me a situation when you did X, Y, and Z. Tell me a situation when, you know, stuff went awry and, you know, how did you deal with it? You know, like, and obviously our questions are a little more detailed than that, but that's essentially what it is. You're trying to like get to the nuts and bolts of it. And what we find is when someone says, you know, like take, you know, a simple role, right? You interview an estimator, right? Someone says, tell me a time when you've had something that's gone over budget. There's not an estimator alive that hasn't had something that's gone over budget. There's also very few estimators that will tell you they've had something that's gone over budget. But to me, like the thing is second someone says like, oh no, that's never happened to me. Or they play it off and it's like, oh, you know, yeah, one time there was this, like, I forgot to count 3 toilet seats, and you're like, it's a disqualifier because like you're obviously, you're not self-aware enough where this is like, you know, where you can say, I'm not trying to make sure, I'm not hiring perfect, you know, like
you're expecting the truth.
I know there's going to be mistakes. I want to know what your pattern is for solving that mistake. And if your pattern is you're going to deny it, then you're not the right person for me.
Yeah, no, that makes a complete sense. I think, you know, and that's where you come to your cultural fit, right? Is to ensure that, I had this when I discussed it with somebody else on another show, that they were saying, one of the biggest problems that they see on construction, they work on the large scale consultancy side, like tunnels and large scale infrastructure, is communication. And communication in all aspects. And that is like, if there's a problem, let's discuss it and get it out there. And like you said there, if you've got somebody who's sitting there, no, nothing really kind of goes around. If I make small mistakes, it's not a problem. What are they going to be hiding if they do actually make a mistake? You sit there thinking,
like you do the same with like a site super. Okay, tell me about the biggest issue you've had on site, or a time when the project's become behind schedule and how you dealt with it. Oh, that's never happened to me. So there's only two types of people that's never happened to. Either you've never built anything before, or you're the best super in the world ever.
Yeah, it's like Kim Jong Un, wasn't it? Where he said that he'd hold in one. I think he got around the course in like so little shots or something or other.
6 shots.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. Everybody's like, that's basically makes you the greatest golfer ever have lived. It's ridiculous. But look, challenges across your team, I think, are always going to be there. It's ensuring that you kind of bring in on the right people. So I would suggest, like, if you're hiring new people, right, what kind of qualities do you specifically look for within the business? And obviously you mentioned there, look, being honest, I think is one. But what would you say are the key kind of qualities that within your team that you look for?
I mean, I think like generally, we really look, like I said, like we look for people that are very proactive. We love people that don't mind getting their hands dirty, and being hands-on. I don't mean that you have to physically get your hands dirty, but what I mean is you have to be able to willing and able to go to the root cause of the problem.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to sit in those, you have to be able to sit there and like have the uncomfortable conversations with whoever you need to have the uncomfortable conversations with. Get to like understand what the problem is and deal with it, and then come up with solutions. You need to be very solution orientated. One of the things I find in construction is there's a someone else's fault mentality. A blame it's very quick to blame is a default, and this is the same in the UK. It's like like people will immediately like blame
mentality. Yeah.
The reality is like, okay, I don't care whose fault it is. We'll deal with whose fault it is, but after the fact. But like, what we need to deal with now is, okay, what happened? Why did it happen? And when I say why, I don't mean like why. Oh, because Johnny left this out. It's like, no, like, why did it happen? Okay, because this wasn't fastened to this, so therefore, it doesn't line up. That or whatever the issue is. All right, what can we do to fix it? And who do we need to engage to make sure it gets fixed right? And then we want people that are, like I said, like really striving for excellence. I want people to take their career seriously. That's both people that are like, are reflective, so they look at how they do stuff. They're thoughtful. They, we'll sit down. We have a mentorship program here. So we'll do, I'll sit down with all my key leaders once a quarter, and we'll sit down a career development mentorship and like, okay, this is what you're doing well. These in, and it's more like that. It's driven by the person on the other side of the table. I'm just really asking questions, and unless there's a specific thing that I do want to highlight or teach, like I'm really just asking questions. But it's like, these are how this is like kind of what you're doing well. Like this is kind of where you're falling short. Like, okay, what can we do? What can we do to get you to the next level? And like what are your main priorities, and and general kind of feedback there, like so that they're like really what we look for. And the people that also like I like my guys to be and girls like to be in like active in the industry. So we we're big in industry trade groups. All our female employees are within whether it's professional women in construction or another organization, kind of guides women to that. And most of our guys are within one or two organizations. So it's, and we're pushing for almost everyone to be in something. So it's, and we think that's important because there's always, we think we do a lot of things right, but we don't do everything right, and we don't do everything best. Like there's people out there that are bigger and better and been doing it for longer. And by being around people, from the Skanskers and the Turners and the Tishmans of the world and the Suffolks, like you pick stuff up, right? You can learn how to do things the right way, having those conversations. Also, what's important for like particularly younger people that are like on the way up is learning how to speak to people that are MDs or CEOs or whatever,
Yeah.
learning how to have those conversations with people. So when you do have to have a serious conversation, you can speak, like a peer and not like a mouse, like you
Yeah.
can you get your point across.
No, I think that makes complete sense. I think that, I always live by one of the mantras is that every day's a school day, right? You don't know everything. I think regardless of what it is that you do, whether you're a CEO or you're a cleaner, I think you're always able to learn something from the people around you. And, having that kind of 360 appraisal process, and it's not necessarily, formal as such, like you say, it's just being around those people and engaging and asking those questions. Because I think certainly for younger people coming through, and it was something I remember when I was young, is that you feel almost like nervous. Oh, I don't know, that's a big wig. I don't want to ask those questions, and that's fair enough. But I think the people that actually really excel are those people that are able to kind of put themselves out there and extract some information from those people. Because most people in construction want to pass on some knowledge, right? I think that's part and parcel of the game. I think in anything that you do, it's about kind of sharing that knowledge. So I think that's great. I think that you kind of encouraging people to be out there and actually push it about, because that's mainly what this podcast is about as well, is people being able to see people like yourself that have kind of come through and got into leadership positions, so that it's people can see that it is that they are able to be there, they're able to get to that stage, and understanding people's stories of how they got there. Because I think your average person tends to sit there and I'm a star super, this is all I'm going to be type of situation. They don't have, and I appreciate that. Some people, that's great. That's all they want to be, what have you. But encouraging more people to actually take that leap of faith, if you like, and share their abilities a little bit more.
100%. Like just like, I think for me, philosophically, it's like, I don't care. And it's what I tell my kids as well. I don't care what you do. Obviously, I don't want them to be a mass murderer, but that's besides the point, right? As long as you pursue to be the best, that if you try to be the best at whatever you do, even if you don't get close to being the best throughout your career, as long as you're constantly pursuing to be the best, you'll have lived you'll have had a valiant career, because you will have at some point tapped out to your maximum potential, right?
Yeah.
Not every football player is going to be Messi,
Yeah.
But if every football player tried to be the best that they could be, they could be, some would be significantly better than they are. That's kind of the thought process there.
No, I think you're spot on. I think I've actually said this on another podcast to somebody, that we were kind of talking down a similar line. I don't know if you've seen that. I think it was the speech that Matthew McConaughey had at the Oscars or whatever, and he talked about how he looks. There's three things he looks for, and one of them was the person that he chases every day, and that person's him in 10 years' time, because you're never going
to that every Saturday morning.
It's great, isn't it? It's one of my. I love it as a quote as well, because I think to myself, comparison is the thief of joy, and I think we tend to compare ourselves to our peers or people who we see are doing really, really well, especially in the world of Instagram. We look and we go, oh, these people have got instant success and they're great or what have you, but having that mentality, but to yourself, is the only thing that you should be looking forward to kind of achieve. So yeah, I think pushing people to be the best versions of themselves is probably the best part of self-development that you can kind of really push as a leader. Yeah, I think it's great to see that businesses are doing, because not everybody does it. Not everybody actually drives their people to be better at what they do. I think some of them actually like to pigeonhole these people and keep them kind of in a specific space. So it's something I was going to ask, right? And it's something I ask everybody, because we see it across the whole of the industry. How are you finding the labour shortages? I mean, obviously, look, New York's quite healthy for labour as such, but it's also really highly competitive. How do you find that? Because there is a labour shortage across the UK, across the US. It's it's difficult. So how are you kind of navigating that, or are you finding that a challenge or not?
So New York's, like you said, like New York's a unique market. It's not, we don't deal with the same issues that the rest of the country deals with. We deal with different issues. Like, it's not like we have no issues, we do, but the issues are different. And it's like it is interesting because when we go to national like conferences, a lot of the topic is the labor shortage. That's not a prime issue in New York.
Yeah.
But the prime issue in New York is qualified labor. So there's a ton of people willing and ready to work. It's just making sure that they're qualified. So one of the things that we as an organization via a larger kind of trade group are trying to work on is getting more trade schools approved within New York City. The problem with construction in New York is it for the longest time, less so now, but for the longest time, has been dominated by union labor. And one of the things that's happened is in the unions were able to get into New York state law was that trade schools had to be approved by a board, and on the board sits like the heads of some of the unions. So that makes it. So it basically creates
prophecy there, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. So it creates like this, like, you know, kind of tough situation. So there's been a couple that have been approved. We're pushing for more. I think construction is at least in New York. I can't speak for the rest of the country, but in New York, construction is a real way for people that come from disadvantaged backgrounds to make a real income, and union or non-union, to make a real income and really improve their station in life. And I think that like one of the things that, you know, that we're trying to do is really encourage more young kids from disadvantaged areas to come into construction, because, you know, the bottom line is your chance of making it in a sport or, you know, some of these other pursuits,
An influencer.
It's slim, right? You know, yeah, okay, you could have a YouTube, but like now there's a ton of people with YouTube, so it's like, you know, how do you but you know, you can go and make as a carpenter, you know, once you're a journeyman carpenter, non-union, like, so this is like not even union, like non-union carpenter, you can make $50 to $60 an hour. That's $100,000 to $120,000 a year. That's not a bad wage, you know. So like you have that wage, all of a sudden now you can buy yourself a house, you can support your family or whatever your pursuits are, you know. So it's there's real opportunity for people on both sides of the, you know, union, open shop, whatever, to really improve where they're at by being by becoming qualified and like in construction in New York. Again, I don't know if the wages are comparable in other areas, but in New York it is a real like force for good.
No, I think, look, in terms of cost of living comparisons, yeah, I think, you know, a lot of, I would say certainly all the areas that we operate in, that we see there's mainly central and eastern, we tend to see a lot of, you know, certainly the trades that can earn significant amounts of money. You know, especially the guys that work the longer hours and they'll do, you know, overtime and whatnot. They're, you know, comparable to some kind of lower level APMs that we see, you know, in terms of how much money they can make. So, you know, it's something that I think more and more people should be driven to. And I think, if I'm honest, how AI is starting to shape the world up, I think we're going to see that kind of come full circle in the next sort of 3 to 5 years, where you're probably going to get lawyers and marketeers and content writers that are training to become plumbers and electricians and carpenters, because they're going to be out of a job, right? It's you know, it's probably, again, we talk about AI, it's probably a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy within construction. It's going to make some things much better in terms of, you know, project management and estimating and all these other kind of higher level strategic decisions that get made. But on the other side, it's actually going to force the labor to kind of come full circle. Something that I think come out in research that was really, really interesting. I think you've been named City and State's Trailblazer in construction. Is that right? You were on the list for that?
Yeah, I was on the list for that. Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Because that's obviously, look, coming in 6 years, shaping the business from where you got it to now, and obviously then being recognised by your peers. How does that feel?
Yeah, no, it's a great accolade. It's like, you know, any accolade, it's great. It's well appreciated. But again, you know, it's like we you know, I'm the spearhead of an organization that's, you know, kind of built on people that are really kind of behind that. So like the credit also belongs to like, the PMs, the supers that put in the hours to really deliver on the projects that we are working on, like, our sub partners. So yeah, it's a great accolade. But it's equally shared amongst the rest of the team.
Yeah. No, look, I think that's a fair point, right? Construction is very much a team game. It's like it's like a striker in football or soccer, as we for our American friends. Is that you take all the accolades because you score the goals, but at the end of the day, if the ball doesn't come to you and it doesn't filter into the positions, then you're never going to be able to score. So, that's fair enough that you make that comparison with the team. You've positioned SD kind of builders as what, at the intersection of innovation and social value, right? Because naturally what you guys do. How do you personally tend to balance like commercial realities with the kind of mission driven projects that you get involved in?
So we work with our partners. One of the things that we'll do is we'll work with not-for-profits on pre-con and pre-development for no charge. And it's not completely altruistic, right? It's like we're looking, we want to be there early, and so once they decide to give a contract out, we're hoping that 8 out of 10 times we're their first port of call. Like, so it's like, and that's been a good strategy for us because it reduces that race to the bottom that construction can very easily become.
Yeah.
It allows us to, kind of really steer the project in a way that makes sense for the client, like whether that's building material, like what building materials we utilize, the layout, the mechanical systems, and the phasing. It really allows us to be smart about it. And I think that like that's been a good way for us to really kind of meet new not-for-profits and kind of really help house and give people a safe space to sleep. The more that we can build, it's better for us, it's better for our bottom line, but it's also better for our mission, right? Our mission is fully aligned with like what we're trying to do. We are trying to help New Yorkers sleep. Like obviously I'm not born in New York, but I've lived here 15 years. The partners of the business are all New Yorkers, born and raised. It's like for them it's very important that the challenges that New York faces that it's not like we have unique challenges. London has the same challenges, Manchester has the same challenges. It's these places are challenged, but it's like we're trying to be a good citizen in our space, and I think we do a good job. We're not the only ones that do it. Like there's other very good construction firms out there that are in the same space that do the similar work. I think we're probably the best in our space, but like that's me being completely impartial there. Yeah, I think it's like, look, like we do care about this. We care about supporting the people, and we also try to work with the right organizations, right? It's just because someone's a charity doesn't mean they're a good charity, right? They're a not-for-profit. Doesn't mean they're a good not-for-profit. So it's like making sure we're working with the right organizations that are really having a good impact and a solid impact on their communities and delivering on what their charters are. And I think that allows us to, really stay focused and, on our side of the equation, if you will.
I mean, look, obviously it's a, like you say, it's a very noble thing, but obviously look, it is a big challenge, right? It's a noble challenge that you guys are involved in, obviously affordable housing and, housing in general, because we know it's a contentious issue in any major city, as you said. How do you kind of, do you feel like you're making a dent collectively or do you find that it's kind of a never ending empty pit of, I was going to say the word despair, it sounds a bit too much, too drastic, but obviously it's the same in London, right? House builders are building and they're building, but do you find that the rate that you're building will never catch the need for it?
Well, I think we need to, I think we definitely need to keep building, right? There's definitely a housing shortage in the US generally and in the state. I think there's opportunities that are policy wise that would there's opportunities on the policy side at the state and the city level that would help with some of the housing insecurity that maybe, like let's say the rent stabilization laws, where the rents are so low that it doesn't make sense for those units to be renovated and therefore reoccupied, because the rents for those units are so low that an investor or a landlord would never make the money back.
Yeah.
There's over 50,000 of those units that are vacant, old units that aren't occupied. That's 50,000 families that could live in there. There's probably 150,000 people that could live in those units. To put that in perspective, if those are online, that would be enough units to end the homeless crisis in New York City, tomorrow. Like, and that currently isn't seen as a priority to get them back online. Why? Because they think that the politicians think if they do that, then they're going to open the floodgates for, like overpricing and whatnot. But all that is being asked is that those rents be reset to today's level of affordability, not the level of affordability that when they were built in the 70s, 80s, 90s,
And that I always find those kind of laws they're great, I guess, at the time when they're put in place, and it's always done with the best intentions, right? But I think they are things that they should be almost like a tracker mortgage. It should be something that's constantly, moves with the today's realities. And I think, like you say, look, naturally you see that much better than we ever will, that it's almost kind of a hindrance. And something I always find quite odd with policymakers and politicians in general, right, is that you guys are in that space. You're sitting there saying, look, there's a solution. Basically, we can pretty much change the lives of enough people that it's going to have such a big dent in the problem that you guys are seeing, which causes, additional problems, crime and all education, all the rest of the issues that it brings in the social space. But they won't make the changes to do that. And is there something that frustrates you?
Yeah, I mean the reason they don't, and look, it's that this is exactly why it's not a priority, is because if there was, let's say 300 buildings that were vacant and decrepit in one area, then it's very obvious to see that. And those 300 buildings added up to 50,000 apartments, I say. Very easy to see that that's a problem. The problem is you have 2 or 3 apartments in, 20,000 buildings across the city that are vacant. So it's a dispersed problem. It's like, any one elective sees it and say, okay, there's only 600 in my region. It's not a big deal for me, but it's every region. So it's like, you add them all up. So that's why, like, this is one of the things that is like it's not a hotbed topic, because it's hard to convince people to be concerned about something that they can't obviously see.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that makes complete sense, right? It's not priority number one, but something that, like you said, was dealt with maybe by a state level, and actually said, well, hold on, we're looking at this in all of your areas. We can see this. Maybe we should make some changes.
Yeah.
I mean, it must be super frustrating. Well, look, you're obviously what we would, I guess, look, a new generation of leadership, right, in New York. What would you say, I guess, and in the US, what would you say to somebody specifically in New York City that's kind of looking to make an impact in the industry? Maybe a young person that's kind of coming into the industry. What advice would you give those people?
I think like kind of what we've been talking about, right? Go to the industry events, like learn what's going on, pay attention, pay attention to the industry as a whole, and like really get a varied and a solid, pick a company that's going to really take care of your career development. It's better early on to sacrifice a little bit of salary to have a better company that's going to help you build your experience and really build your career, so you can earn more in your 30s and 40s, then kind of take a little bit more at the front end, but then kind of like dwindle in your career like later on. So I think that like it's And you're not talking a lot, right? You're talking the difference between maybe, 10 feet, how much is someone paying an APM early on? It's like the top's 10, 15 grand difference. So it's not like, but it's better to be smart about where you go. And make sure that that company has a good career progression track for you. And then be attentive, like show up early. I can think back to when I was first started out. One of the biggest things that I had is the head of construction at the company I was working with would come into the office at like 7 a.m. and I would go into the office at 7 a.m. He would spend half an hour with me 3 days a week, just showing me how to do certain things. That was invaluable early in my career. Because when you show up early, you're going to see things that on site or in the office that you don't see once the day started. And people are going to have time to speak to you, sit down and mentor you. Plus, they're also going to be, they're also going to feel like you want to do well. The worst thing is when someone comes in, if someone comes in or may like kind of, it gives the impression that you kind of hear as a job and you're not seeing it as a career. So that would be my my kind of 2 or 3 tidbits of advice.
You know what? It's funny because I've spoken to so many different people in different positions in different states. Everybody seems to kind of have the same thing. It's like that intention of shop, and we have that same issue in our industry, right? It's that I don't want to keep kind of like Generation Z bashing, but I think there's been a mentality shift with the youngsters that it's like kind of, you see a lot online now, don't go and build somebody else's dream, build your own type of situation. You don't need to work hard. They don't pay you enough money. 9 to 5 is all you need. And it's like, well, nothing was ever built with that kind of mentality, right?
Well, look at this, right? You have a recruitment company. I'm sure before you started your recruitment company, you were a recruitment consultant for another firm that you didn't own the company.
Indeed.
Right. That experience, regardless of what they paid you, that experience was invaluable for you because you cut your teeth on someone else's dime and they paid you to do it. So it's like you made all the mistakes that you could possibly make, and like learn how to do it properly. The same is in any industry. Like you come in and it's not that like you're building someone else's dream. They're just at a different stage in life, where they've gone through the, for want of a better word, basic training, let's say. They're here, so they know how to do certain things. You come in, like, what downside is it if you work hard? If you work hard, you're only going to get better. And then in 5 years' time, you can go off and do whatever you want to do. You can start your own business or whatever, but if you don't work hard at any point, like at what point do you think, okay, yeah, in 5 years' time, I'm going to work hard when I got my own business? No, complete nonsense. Like,
I'm going to start working hard in 5 years. Yeah, once I watch everybody else make mistakes, maybe if I get fired enough times, I'll then start my own company.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. It is a mindset that kind of it bemuses me.
I don't necessarily see that there was a Gen Z thing or Gen whatever. Because I do think that like our peers, at least, when I was coming up, the reason, look, I got to COO at 31 years old. The reason is because most of my peers just weren't willing to do what they were doing. They weren't willing to do it. Like they just weren't coming in early. I was the only person that went in early and got the training off the director of construction. Like, they just weren't willing to take, sit down and do a degree after hours. They just weren't willing to do those little things. And I think that my advice to anyone is do that. And that we encourage that here. Like we pay at our firm, we pay for education, we pay for people's licenses, like we make sure that, they're well trained and, some of them leave and that's okay, whatever. The next person will come in and we'll train them. It's like, it is what it is. It's part of the business, but I'd rather have well-trained, competent people that I pay, for their training than have a ton of ne'er-do-wells.
Yeah, because that's going to cost you more money in the long run anyway. I think it's one of those situations, right? Early bird catches the worm. That saying's been around for forever. At the end of the day, and I think it shows that if you go in and kind of show up early and show that commitment, then you're going to be somebody that's going to have an impact, and you're going to be seen. At the end of the day, I don't think enough people kind of take that on. Magic wand time, right? It's a question I ask every single guest that's on, right? If you could fix one particular issue in construction, maybe specifically in your field, what would it be and why?
Well, I think one of the things that I think is important, and I think it goes back to what we talked about before, is making sure there's enough competently trained people, right? You're like, it's a tough industry that we work in. There are a ton of opportunities in the industry. The bottom line is like, if people aren't trained well, there's huge risk there. There's risk to like quality, but there's also risk to themselves. I think this year 7 people have died on construction sites within New York City. That's 7 people that kids whose kids will not have a dad, and because it was all guys, will not have a dad growing up. Having well trained and well thought out people, operators on site that see it as a profession and not just a job, and having that mentality, I think would eradicate, the majority of those deaths that happen. Like, and a lot of it was like error. Like there was some form of user error, right? Where they either didn't wear a harness or they, were operating a machine while looking over here, or something like that happened. So it's these things where like the level of professionalism and the training, which are to me the same thing. Like it's like you have they're part and parcel of the same thing. That's kind of what I would look to do, and I think that you would get better buildings, you'd have safer project sites, and you'd get buildings that get built on time.
Yeah, I mean that makes complete sense. I think it's it's something that's simple, but doesn't get enough kind of attention really. So. And obviously, look, the last question I've got for you, I appreciate that you're obviously still young in your career, right? And you've obviously got into a position, like you said, at 31, relatively young, and you've done that role for a number of years. So this question might sound a little bit like as if I'm talking to someone at the end of their career, but it's not. What kind of legacy would you want to leave behind? Not just in buildings, but, I guess in the people and the places that you've helped shape. What legacy would you like to leave in that space?
It's a couple of things, right? I think like, so I want like the guys that that are working, the senior guys that are working for me now, to within their career go on and ideally, if they so please, run construction businesses or businesses, generally. I think because that would be, if that happens, that's going to be okay. These people, obviously, they have to have the right wherewithal. A lot of the credit belongs with them, but it was also like you gave them the right training. You helped mentor them to this point. I think that would be, and ideally, hopefully, that's within the organization, right? Like we have a couple of subcontractors that we own, so hopefully they come up and they run those subcontractors. That'd be fantastic. But if not, like that would also be good. The second is like the business is viable beyond myself. Meaning that like, after we've retired, the business goes on, kind of, for the next, 50 years, like that would be a good, kind of a solid legacy. And the third was that, third would be, like my kids and, hopefully grandkids, kind of will go on and do something great, like we'll do something. And great doesn't mean they'll go on and be a doctor. It just means they'll do something that's worthwhile, like a noble pursuit. They'll try and push themselves to the best that they can possibly be. I think that like, and what that means, I don't know what that means. It could mean different things for each of the kids, right? So it could mean, but I think that they would be the 3 things that I think, the viability of the business, the viability of the leadership of the business going on to run businesses, whether that's this business or another business, and the long-term success of my kids and hopefully grandkids.
No, listen, I think that makes complete sense. I think that makes complete sense, and that is a legacy to leave. I think if you achieve all of those things, then you kind of done your job, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, look, I really, really appreciate you coming on, Ryan. It's been great to speak to you. Really appreciate you coming on.
No, I appreciate you having me on, Jamie.
Good stuff.
Yeah, thanks.
Take care.
Thanks.